Hello, my friends. Jerry Rosa here at the Rosa String Works Workshop. Oh my goodness, this live stream software that I'm using, they had an update or something and they changed everything. Oh my gosh. I hope it's working. I don't see any viewers out there yet, but we'll pretend like we've got some and we'll just keep going. Caleb just gave me the thumbs up, so I guess that means it must be working at least. Well, I don't have a particular program planned for today, but I do have a number of videos and clips and things to show you, and we will do that, and then we'll take questions and answers. I just want to remind you that when you post your questions, be sure to start them with question marks. In other words, put a couple of question marks right at the very beginning of your question. That way I can find it easier, because they scroll up the screen pretty fast and it's hard to find them. And let's see, I've got an outline here and we'll try to follow that fairly closely. The first thing is I do want you all to make suggestions for, shop talks for future shop talks. And if you think you've got something that would be particularly good, be sure to just email it to me or whatever, rosastringworks@gmail.com. We just got back from Mountain View and we had a good time down there. And the first thing that I want to do is make any apologies to anyone who couldn't find us. I had plans to stay around the gazebos and I had mentioned the front porch of the wildflower bed and breakfast, and we pick on the front porch there. Well, all the people that came down there, and kind of surprised me that they did come down there from the Rolla area, there was over a half a dozen folks. They all had different plans and they wanted to play in different places, so I couldn't exactly abandon them, but that meant that the folks that were looking for us probably couldn't find us. So I made as many trips through the mountain, through the gazebo area and the other areas as I could to try to be out in the public, and several people did find us. And I'm going to show you one of the jams, and I put the names on the screen so that you can kind of tell who people are and where they're from. So we have just about a 3-minute clip here of this is just one of the jams, and this one's kind of a slow jam here, so it's not exactly representative of the whole weekend, but anyway, I just thought you might enjoy seeing this and seeing some of the folks that showed up. Take it though, bro.
lives around says tear the lighthouse down. You see the big ships, they don't pass this way anymore. There's no use of it standing round. around me that I might clearly see. If it wasn't for the lighthouse, tell me where would this ship be?
Very nice, very nice.
And just for the record, to the best of my ability, I did try to put out a notice. I did put out a quick video while I was down there that told people where we were that one evening. The internet connection wasn't the best down there. Just the phone connection in general where we were wasn't very good, and I couldn't get that video out until I got back up to my room. So anyway, it just didn't work out quite like I had planned, and I'm just sorry if anyone missed us that was looking for us down there. So I hope everybody had a good time. I know we all had a great time. So going into talking about that a little bit more, Jesse Burge, who builds guitars, gave me this coffee mug down there. I thought that was pretty nice of him. He's from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and Jesse Burge Guitar Shop. I played one of his guitars and it sounded really fine. Very, very good sounding guitar. I also got some gifts from someone here that said, don't make a big deal out of this. But I'll just name their first names, Jeff and Lynn. And Jeff and Lynn sent me a huge care package of stuff. It is absolutely wonderful. I'll just pull out some of the stuff and show you. And they said, don't make a big deal out of it. Well, when you get this much nice stuff, you got to make some kind of deal out of it. But a really nice leather guitar strap, a nice case, carrying case, and a tuner. Real nice tuner. This is a Boss tuner. Put it up close where you can maybe see the model number there. In case, I know that camera is not the highest resolution, but the way we have it set, TU15 is the model number on that one. Looks like a really nice one. Haven't used any of this stuff yet because I wanted to talk about it here first. Here's another just Klein tool carrying case, brand new, but it's really nice. Got a belt clip on it. Actually, I guess this is for my smartphone now that I think about it. I do have a little smartphone holder on my belt, but this looks like it'd be even better. That's pretty cool. I hadn't even thought of what that was until just now. But yeah, that's awesome. That's really nice. Then there was yet another really nice leather guitar strap. A set of pins, Martin pins, bridge pins, and these have the it looks like abalone shell inlay in them is what it looks like. Really nice, brand new. Bunches of sets of strings. Wow, there's just a lot of stuff. I can't believe they sent all this stuff. It's wonderful. And here's really cool, and I only took this out. I haven't tried it at all yet, but it you know, it says well, I'm not exactly sure how it's to be used. It says 4-mic noise cancellation, adaptive, WinSmart technology, auto mute reminder. It doesn't actually say what it is. A Bluetooth headset. I haven't, like I said, I've been busy, been gone to Mountain View, and then had a busy week I'm going to tell you about too. But so I haven't actually got this out to play with it yet, but it looks awesome. It really looks cool. So I'm excited to get to play with that. A bunch more strings. Oh my gosh, here's another 5 sets of strings. These are the Acoustic SP phosphor bronze, which is what I like. And these are extra light. And that will be handy here in the shop for certain guitars, especially because there's lots of guitars that come in here that probably do need extra lights. And then one of these deals they put on the end of your drill for tuning keys. This one has the slots in it for the big bass keys also, which I made one like similar to this that I use for the big upright basses for tuning them because it takes forever to turn the windings to wind those. And then yet some more pins, string pins, bridge pins, and yet some more. And these look like these are solid wood. These appear to be plastic, but they may be ebony also. Wow, just tons of stuff. Wow, thank you so much, Jeff and Lynn. I really, really, really appreciate it. Very, very, very nice. Now I got to remember not to leave my smartphone in here right now because I won't be able to find it. Put it back in my other holster. But this is a far nicer holster. That's really cool. Okay, well, moving right along. I think that takes care of the gifts. So thanks, Jesse, and thanks, Jeff and Lynn. I got something here completely off topic. Most of you seem to like almost any kind of video I put out, but there are a select number of folks that absolutely don't want to see anything but musical instruments. Well, I'm sorry, but you're going to be sorely disappointed if that's the case, because I am going to put out a video either today or by this weekend that has nothing to do with anything else except pain and managing the pain of kidney stones. If you're a kidney stone sufferer, I have come up with this, I'm going to call it the Rosa maneuver, that for me at least has worked 100% of the time, every single time, and I have now used it for over a year before I wanted to tell people about it because I wanted to make sure that it worked every time. Well, this past Wednesday morning, I woke up 3 a.m. with a huge pain from the kidney stone. In fact, I woke up screaming, going, ow, ow, ow. I couldn't stand it. It was just killing me. And if you know what it's like, then you also know what it's like when it passes and the relief. And for those of you who've never had that, let me just try to explain two things about kidney stones. Number one, they all hurt really bad. Some hurt way worse than others. I bet they all hurt really bad. So you can imagine if they hurt really bad and then some are even worse, how bad they are. And then the other way I would explain it to you, it would be like if you took a knife blade about that long, not a real long blade, but just a nice, enough to cause real pain, and you stuck that knife blade just right there in your back like that, and you just held it there and just held it there and held it there and held it there. That's the kind of pain you're talking about. And then when you pull it out, the relief. And it's just, the relief. And that's exactly what it feels like. It just feels like a knife in your back. Well, anyway, I am going to put out that video. I'm not going to tell you about the maneuver right now, but I will put out a video explaining the whole thing. And for me, every single time, and I'm talking 8 to 10 times now that I've done it, it has fixed it almost at the snap of your finger. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. It's just something I stumbled on, and it seems to work every time. I hope it works for other people. Realistically, I doubt that it will, but you never know. So I'm going to put it out in a video form, and I hope it helps a lot of folks. We got about 103 viewers out there right now. Okay, so I told you I've been real busy this week. Well, we've been playing shows for the elementary schools. Wednesday at noon, from noon till about 2, we played for the Lucy Wortham James Elementary School, and this is just one of the classes that were there. I don't know which particular class this was, but you can see there on the table I had my arrowhead collection and some of the other artifacts. And I talked to the kids briefly about that and basically the way this particular school does it is they rotate each class in front of us. And so we end up doing our same program 6 different times. So it's a 15 to 20 minute program, and we did that 6 different times. So it takes a little bit out of you by the time you do that 6 times, and it's just one right after another. You don't get any break. So anyway, but we had fun doing that. So that was the Lucy Wortham James Elementary School. And then yesterday from 8 a.m. till about 10 a.m., we played an open auditorium for all the, well, I don't know, it was another 4 to 5 classes of kids. I think they were all 3rd graders. So we played a show for them first, and then after the band left, I then did a Arrowhead artifact presentation to that same group with a slideshow and the whole bit. So I enjoy doing that for the kids, and they really seem to get a lot out of it, and they just can't wait to tell you their stories about the artifacts they found, and also about who in their family plays music, etc. So they enjoy it a lot. Okay, moving right along. The next thing I wanted to talk to you about is the t-shirts. They have been selling like crazy since the last shop talk. Here's a picture of the cabinet, and I just want to show you the top shelf still has quite a few. That's the one that says I was better, but I'm getting over it. And from left to right, as you're looking at it there, the left is the large, the next one is extra large, the next pile is 2XL, and then the fourth pile to the right is your 3XL. So you can see there which ones we have and which ones we don't. And so you can order according to that. I would appreciate it, because we are going to sell them out, and once they're gone, they're going to be gone. So you can see there, it's not easy being me. That's the only one that is not out of any particular size, but we're getting very low on the extra large there, it looks like, and the 2X also. Then on the next shelf down, it's simple, but it's complicated. We're completely out of the large. And then on the next one, everything's a hammer. We're completely out of the 2X and nearly out of the extra large. Well, we're nearly out of all of those, actually. And we're also nearly out of all of the logo ones on the bottom. We are completely out of the extra large on the logo. But we do have the 2X and the 3X still, and looks like we have one large. So there you go. That's where we're at. I just want to show it to you in case you would want to get one. Try to order according to what you see there, because otherwise we're just going to have to tell you that we'll have to send your money back because we don't have it. And my next thing to talk to you about is another video off subject as well, and that is firewood. You all know how much firewood I have talked about having to cut. Well, I got started, and here's a little clip about some of that.
Well, my friends, this pile of logs was dragged here with my big old Bobcat, that T300. It's a pretty big pile of logs. I've cut bigger piles, but it is a pretty big pile, and it looked a whole lot bigger about 30 minutes ago before I cut all the smalls off of it. Most of the smalls are already laying on the ground, and you can probably start to see that here. Yeah, it's quite a bit of work cutting all this, and it's kind of hot out today. It's probably right around 80, so it's a little more work than I was expecting to do today, but I thought I better get some wood cut. This is probably on the ground at least a full trailer load already. And my trailer's over here. It's a dump trailer. This is bigger than a pickup bed by quite a bit, actually. It's more than 4 feet wide. I think this might be 5 feet wide. I can't remember, honestly. But here's my saw that I'm using today. It's the Husqvarna 372 XP. It's got a 25-inch bar on it right now. It can handle up to, I think, a 32 or a 30 for sure. Might even be able to handle a 36. I'm not sure, but it's all I can do to handle a 25. And they get more power when you put a smaller bar on them anyway. So to me, you know, unless I'm cutting gigantic wood, this 25-inch bar is plenty big. So this works really well for me. It's a real good saw. It starts easy. Cuts just like butter. Well, there's what she looks like after another 15 minutes of cutting. I don't know if you can tell any difference or not, but there's a lot of firewood piled up there. I'll show you what it looks like when I get her in the trailer. I imagine there's 5 or 6 trailer loads of wood here, maybe more. Well, there's the junk that I'm hauling back. That's what the bucket's good for. You can see the trailer is pretty packed. Now keep in mind that's 5 foot wide, 9 feet long, and the sides are about 18 inches, and you can see I don't pay much attention to the sides. It's packed. You can see how close the bed is to the tire there. That used to be 6 inches away. I can't even get 2 fingers in there, so you know, it's just a little over 1 finger away from the tire now. Same way on that side. You can see it's a pretty big load of wood. I don't actually stack it, but I throw it on there in such a way that it's almost like it's stacked. So, you know, after you've done this most of your life, you get kind of good at stuff like that. So it's about as much as you can get on there. That's about all that trailer wants, especially with those 2 small truck tires on there. Here's what the rest of the pile looks like. You can see that we really didn't make a dent yet. I thought you might find it interesting as I'm hauling this load of wood back. All of this destruction is by hogs. You can see how the field is just tore up, and it goes all the way down. I mean, it's a long ways, and that was pretty much done in one night. And this is not the only destruction. I mean, there's other places on the farm that are tore up just like this. So they do a number on this stuff, and you know, they're an invasive species really, so we need to wipe out most of them. I enjoy hunting them, don't get me wrong, but I wish there weren't so many of them. So anytime I get a chance to shoot one, I will, that's for sure, because they reproduce so fast and they just tear the fields up. And you might think, well, this is just a brushy field, who cares? Well, try to cut the brush on it once sometime with your brush hog, and then you'll see what the problem is. It's like trying to drive over a bunch of boulders. It's terrible. The best part about this trailer is the unloading, as you will watch here. All I have to do is lift up on this button. You can see it's going right up. It's just going to unload itself. It's a real joy to not have to unload all the wood. And then some people would say, but it's not stacked. Trust me, I don't care. It only stays here about 3 or 4 days, and that much wood is gone in 3 or 4 days. No, I didn't bang the building here. I keep those other logs there piled there, so when these bounce off, they'll hit that, so nothing hit the building.
Yeah, you can see that's one of the reasons I wear a t-shirt that says, "It's not easy being me." I know so many of you just think that I'm creating my own problem, but the truth is it's just a neat old house, but it's just huge and impossible to heat. And yes, I've already fixed everything you can fix on that house. It's super insulated, new windows, new doors, you know, pretty much everything you can do to it, I've done it, and it's still crazy, crazy, crazy hard to heat. It's because of the 6,500 square feet of concrete that has no thermal break. And then other people naively suggest, just put a thermal break, just cut around it. You ought to come and show me how to do that. Yeah, you would just, yeah. It's just ridiculously impossible to even think about doing that. So anyway, it just is what it is. I cut a lot of firewood. To be truthful, it's good exercise for me, and I'm kind of glad to do it. It kind of keeps me moving, you know, and I'm getting worse and worse with the arthritis. I don't know how much longer I can do it. I'm not even positive I can get through this year, but I think I can. Rick Hubbard gave me a nice donation in pounds. I don't get a lot of stuff in pounds. Thank you, Rick. I really do appreciate it. He's from Leicester, England. At least that's how I'll pronounce it. I'm sure I butchered that. But thank you, Rick Hubbard. Thank you very much. Let's see, we're just about to the end of my prepared program. I just thought I would show you the status of the last hurrah guitar, those of you who are following those videos. It's looking pretty good. The finish is going on it pretty well. It's going to be a pretty guitar. I still have the neck taped off. I wish I could show you the name here, because I think the name is one of the prettiest parts about it. And it looks really, really dark there, but it's a rosewood peg head also. I can't find the camera. It's backward. I'm looking at a monitor there, and it's all backwards to me. But anyway, it's turning out really, really nice. I'm getting anxious to get it strung up. I've put on about 4 to 5 coats, sanded it completely off, put another 4 to 5 coats, sanded it pretty much completely off. And now I've put on about 2 or 3 more coats. There's still a little bit of grain showing. You know, not very much, but there is still some grain showing. More than likely, there'll be a spot or 2 that's just going to continue to show. But I'm hoping to put on about 3 or 4 more coats, level it some, and buff it out and call it finished. So we're getting close, I think. In the last shop talk, I showed you this 00 Martin that I'm working on. Again, not to be confused with the one Caleb built a whole new top for. We had to do basically very similar work to them. This one was completely full of glue, and you can see now that I've got the glue all cleaned out. It was just full. Kind of like what you can see here on the sides here. That glue was all over the inside. Just horrible. So I've got all that cleaned out. And I've got the top was severely, and when I say severely, I mean severely warped on this. It was really warped. And you can see it's just almost as flat as a pancake now. And, you know, this brace was always flat, but from on this side here, it was all warped out, just really warped. And you can see I made a new cross brace here, and I put a new brace here. I don't have them carved down yet, and I put in a new bridge pad, and that's out of Paducah. So that flattened it all out really, really well. I can see there's some more loose bracing up in here yet, and some different things, some more loose bracing here. So I've got some more work to do to all that, but then I got to carve all this back, and then of course put it all back together. So that's the status of that. And of course there will be a video on that down the road too. It would just be nice if there was 3 of me so we could get all this done. I think that concludes it. So if you want to start your questions, be sure to put a few question marks in front there. I would appreciate it, and we'll try to answer your questions. If you don't have any questions, we're going to be concluding this fairly quickly. Here's a question. Can you show us how your saddle slotting jig is made? Okay, I'll try to do that. Give me just 1 second here.
Opal's got a little shop, coffee, tea, and soda pop, written on the faded window sign. Ruby and Pearl are her best friends. There you'll find the 3 of them, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 9:30. You can set a watch by their routine.
Okay, I just had to go find it. It's really simple, and the shape of this, do not be confused by the shape of this. I had a square, just a regular square piece of plastic. It was almost big enough to reach across a guitar, but it wasn't. So I turned it diagonally in order to get the most length out of it. That's why it is in this weird shape here on the ends. That you don't need to make it this shape. You can make it square, rectangular, anything. Round on the ends, it doesn't matter. So that's just there so I had enough length to clamp it to the sides of the guitar. So when I do lay this on top of the guitar, I can put a clamp right here like this, right on the side edges of the guitar. So that's why it's the shape it is. that it's just the size of the plastic that I had available to me. And you could make this out of, say, like a hardwood, like maple. It would be no problem. I just made it out of plastic because I had plastic. This under here is just a bolt, and this is just a bolt. It's just a bolt head, and you can see I milled a slot in here. Now I have a milling machine, so that made that easy to do that. And that put the bolt head recessed so that if this is clamped to the top, that'll still slide and it won't hit the top of the guitar. These are just little knurled knobs that I made. And, you know, you could just use a wing nut here instead of a knurled knob. A wing nut would be perfectly fine. I got a metal lathe. Why not make a knurled knob? So I did. And so basically this just allows this to slide in any particular shape that you need. And this shelf right here in front, the router rides on that shelf, and you set your angle that you want your saddle cut by tightening this down. And when we do it on the bench, there's 2 screw holes here on the ends. We screw it down to this. And when we do it on the bench, we do this. And when we do it on the guitar, we'll take this piece off and just set this like over the sound hole area of the guitar. So anyway, the point is that we sometimes do it on this board, and sometimes we do it on top of the guitar. This one just floats. It doesn't really need to be anchored down when you put it on top of the guitar. It just sits there, and the router just runs on top of these 2 things. And the biggest trick to it is marking it accurately and setting your bit to follow that mark, on your bridge. You want to just make sure, really make really sure you're cutting it on the right side of the mark, and that that you really have it accurately following the mark. And you do that by this, and by just micro adjusting this slide back and forth until you get it exactly where you want it. And we do quite a few iterations of testing it way before we start cutting. Like we'll run it back and forth across there a bunch of times with different lights and things, and look at it really close and make sure we're getting it exactly where we want it. Because I've said this many, many, many times, and it is absolutely a fact, and that is that intonation is the single most important thing about the setup of your guitar. There's nothing more important than intonation. And if you don't understand what intonation is or why it's so important, intonation is just simply making your guitar sing in harmony. I mean, that's really what it amounts to. If you get every single string intonated correctly and you hit a chord, it sounds harmonious. Everything rings perfectly together. When that intonation is wrong, when the bridge, and really in just simple layman's terms, it just means if the intonation is wrong, then your bridge saddle, or your bridge entirely, or at least your bridge saddle is in the wrong place, minimum. It's just in the wrong place. That's what it means. When the intonation is off, it's in the wrong place. When it's right, then it will just make the chord sound better. The whole instrument will just sing better and more uniformly, and it will just sound like a choir singing in harmony together. It just sounds wonderful. And that's why it's so important to get that right. I've told this story before, but I'm going to tell it again because it really was a very dramatical experience for me, especially. This man came up to me. He had a Weber mandolin, so it's a very good mandolin, and he was really upset, you could tell. And he said, "I've heard that you can set up an instrument and make them sound better." He says, "I've owned this thing for," I think he said, like 10 years. And he says, "It's never sounded right." And he says, I've fought it and fought it. And he just was, you could just tell he was really upset about it because he wanted it fixed. Well, as soon as he handed it to me and I hit one chord, I went, whoa, the intonation was off. I mean, it was just obvious. So all I did was get my tuner out and I set the bridge to the right spot. I swear it didn't take me 5 minutes, but I had to move the bridge quite a ways. And once I got the bridge in the right spot and got the right noting going, I handed it back to him, and I swear to you, God is my witness, he starts crying. Tears went down his eyes. I mean, he was so happy because it sounded so much better and so much different. So intonation truly is the single most important thing that you can do to your instrument. And that is all done via this thing right here, really. I've shown how you actually do set the intonation, and that's using my little jig. This hangs on the tail pin of your guitar. This comes up over the back edge. You put your 2 strings on here. I know you've seen this a million times, many of you have. And I put the 2 E strings on here and then go up over the saddle, and I leave the bridge and the saddle floating. If the saddle slot's already cut in the bridge, I put the saddle in there, and then I leave the bridge and I float the bridge until I get the intonation perfect. And the way you know that the intonation's perfect is that you note it open, you get your E noting open perfectly, then you check it at the 12th fret. If it's sharp, that means the distance between the 12th fret and the saddle is too short. If it's flat, the distance between the saddle and the 12th fret is too far back. And it's just that simple. It's not rocket science whatsoever. Typically, if you're close, it just takes micro adjustments, and you just keep adjusting and checking and adjusting and checking until you get it exactly right. Then you mark all that and you make sure you get it glued down in that spot, or you cut your slot in that spot, whatever the case is that you're working on at that time. But that's how the intonation thing works. That's how this little thing works. It's pretty basic. It's not very complicated. I do have these foam pads on here. These are like a rubbery soft pad. That also helps to keep from damaging the top of the guitar. And the pads are underneath this also, and this is screwed down. So when we're doing it on the workbench, we want everything screwed down and tight. It makes it easier. When we do it on the guitar top, we just clamp it to the guitar, which is kind of the same thing of securing it. We don't actually clamp this piece to the guitar, though. It just floats and sits there. It's just a shelf for the router to sit on top of. This is the important side over here. I hope that makes sense. I hope that answers that question. Let me go to the next question. And it looks like a bunch of them have scrolled up the screen. Let me see. On a radius fingerboard on a violin, is the radius the same on the narrow top and the wide bottom part? I'll be truthful on that. I'm not sure I can answer that one on a violin. I would say it's different. It seems to be a little more abrupt on the narrow end than on the wider end. It's much more fanned out. So I would say that if you're talking strictly radius, it doesn't stay the same. But it's such a subtle change going back that you would hardly know it. I don't know if I have a better answer than that on that. I don't consider myself to be the violin expert, but I do know a lot about setting them up and stuff. So I don't know. That's the best answer I've got on that right now. Bill Webb said the t-shirts are real nice. They do not shrink. I have several of them. Thank you, Bill. Yeah, they are good shirts, and they will be gone, so get them while you can. When are you going back to Mountain View? Betty asks. Probably in the spring to early summer, usually around June or first week of June or so, we go back again. So we'll be back down there one of these days, and of course you'll hear about it right here. Kenneth Dwyer I apologize. I'm having trouble reading these because, okay, now I got it back on the screen. They were off the screen too much. When is it appropriate to use semi-chrome polish or use Renaissance wax? The answer is always. No, Kenneth. You know, here the way I use them is the Renaissance wax is your top coating, and you know, if you've got everything polished up and looking good and everything's fine, then you top it off with your Renaissance wax. If you've got some very minor scratches or just buffed up places that are a little bit rough, like maybe they're not as shiny, I guess is the best way to say it, as some of the other areas, you want to shine it all up, well then the semi-chrome polish works really, really good to shine that up. And for me personally, I really do like these blue shop towels the best. I mean, I've used t-shirts, I've used all kinds of different materials, and honestly, this is my favorite thing to use. I just maybe just take my finger and just touch some water right there just to get a little bit of water on that, and then take the semi-chrome and work it in like so, like that. And it just really does a nice job. And then of course you can take the rest of the dry rag and buff it off, you know. So that's how I do it. But now, by the way, these are not all created equal. There's some of these that have quilting in them, and I do not like the quilted ones at all. I really like these, the ones that are basically just smooth. These are much better. Let's go to the next question, if I can find it. Where do I get my materials, basically? Michael is asking, you know, the wood and inlays and things like that. Well, some of my wood I get right here on my farm. You've seen me talk about using, you know, some cherry and some walnut and some Osage orange. No, those are mostly for decoration. They're not really for the entire structure of the instrument. The structure wood for the tops and for the backs of the mandolins and sides and necks of the mandolins, I get that all from Old Standard Wood up in Fulton, Missouri. John Griffith is his name, and I've known him for many years, about 40 years, close to it anyway. And he started out as a conservation agent and was selling instrument wood on the side, and then he turned it into a fairly large business, and all the big suppliers buy from him now. I mean, all the big manufacturers, Gibson, Martin, Taylor, everybody seems to get wood from John. He has very good top boards, and if you want maple, he's got very good maple. He even sells some sycamore, and sycamore is very good for building mandolins and violins and things too. In terms of the Padauk wood that I typically use for guitars, backs, and sides, I just scrounge different hardwood lumber stores, and when I find a piece of quarter sawn Padauk, I buy it. And even sometimes when I don't have any orders, if I'm in a store like that and I find a piece of quarter sawn Padauk, I just buy it, you know, and put it on the shelf and let it set. Most of the stuff that I build them out of has been sitting on the shelf for many years, and I am running low on it, and I honestly don't really plan to restock. You know, as I'm getting toward the end of the career here, I'm slowing everything way down. But that's how I get all my materials. Now, have I ever got it anywhere else? Yes, I've bought some materials from Stu-Mac. I've bought some materials from LMI. I believe out in California is where they are. But anyway, yeah, I've even bought some things off of eBay, especially if I bought from them before, and then, you know, I know that I can trust them, you know. So you do have to be a little bit leery sometimes when you're buying off of something like eBay. Let's see if I can find the next question. Any chance of your resonator build in the future? Does a metal nut saddle overlay hurt the sound compared to tall bone nut? Well, Paul, I do plan to try to build a dobro yet. As soon as I turn loose of some more of this stuff here, that's probably, I'm debating on whether I'm going to do the dobro first or my ultimate mandolin first. I'm, yeah, and just to be perfectly cad about it and honest about it, I'm going to try to blow them up big and make them clickbait and just try to get a lot of views on them, because it's kind of my super last hurrah, if you will. This is my last hurrah guitar, or that one up there is. And yeah, the mandolin, I'm going to make it some just crazy gaudy title like World's Finest Mandolin Ever Built by a Human. I mean, I'm just going to, and I'm just telling you up front, I'm going to do something like that. I don't know what it's going to be yet. If you have a good suggestion, pass it on. But anyway, so I'm going to build a mandolin yet, or at least I'm going to try. Honestly, I don't know if I can get through a mandolin. I really don't. I'm not sure I can. I may have just waited too long. But I am going to get through the dobro, I'm pretty sure. Anyway, thanks for asking. We'll get working on that. But your question is, does a metal nut and saddle overlay, which I'm not sure about the word overlay there, hurt the sound compared to a tall bone nut? Well, I think I can answer that. For me, metal, every time I've heard it, I'm not saying I've heard every situation there could be, but every time I've heard metal used on the nut or the especially the saddle, not so much on the nut, but on the saddle for sure, it's way too harsh for my ear. It just doesn't sound good to me at all, no matter whether you're using aluminum or brass or whatever. It just doesn't sound good to me. Some people just think it sounds wonderful, but for me, it's way too harsh. I don't like that sound at all. So I wouldn't use metal if you could get away from it. I would use bone or antler or whatever. Antler and bone, basically the same thing. The main difference between bone is it's internal and it rots, so you kind of have to boil it and dry it out and get, kind of prepare it, if you will. Where antler is, it's just, dry and good pretty much once you get it. It gets a little drier over time, but you don't really have to do too much to the antler to prepare it. Let's see, do we have any other questions? What kind of buffing wheel do you use, or do you prefer by hand? Yeah, Clyde, we do have a buffing wheel here in the shop, and we do use it, especially when we're doing the backs and tops and maybe the sides of guitars and things. And it's pretty handy, but honestly, the by hand almost works better most of the time. We will often kind of go over it with the big buffing wheel, and then we do maybe some touch-up or final polishing by hand. The big buffing wheel came from StewMac as the kit, and I would show it to you, but it's a little hard to show you with this camera right now. Otherwise, I've shown it in quite a few videos over the years. Those old fat shaking machines, the ones that you put the belt around you and they go like this? Well, the stand on that is the stand I used to put my buffing wheel on. So you just need to put it up on something where you can get, pretty good access to it with your instrument, so you don't beat your instrument up on something, And I will tell you, and ask me how I know. Really make sure you know what you're doing when you use a buffing wheel, because it can grab your instrument and throw it on the floor. Yeah. Ask me how I know. It can happen. So be very, very, very careful with a buffing wheel, and make sure you don't ever let it grab the edge. Like if you're doing the side of a guitar, and I'm faking this is the round buffing wheel, okay, and this is the side of the guitar. You don't ever want to get up here. You want to make sure you stay here. You don't let it grab here, because it'll jerk down. I mean, that's not that big a deal if you got a good grip on it, but you make sure you have a very good grip on it at all times when you're using a buffing wheel. It can change your life really quick. And it's not for the better. Okay. Do you have any pictures, videos of the wildlife in your area? Uh, yeah, I do have. I think in one shop talk I showed a few of the things. I showed some coyotes and I don't know, crows and hawks and things that were coming to some of the dead animals. We find dead animals out here quite often, to be honest. It's just the way it is out in the country like this. Just recently, there was a dead deer laying right beside my trail out there. Why? I have no idea. I don't know if coyotes killed it or if it just died of old age or what. But stuff like that happens fairly often. And when that happens, then predators just come out of the woodwork, you know. And I'm glad they do because they clean up that kind of thing. That's what they're there for. I'm going to scroll up here, and I think it scrolled a long ways. I'm going to go back, and I'm sorry it's taking me a second, but that's just the way this thing works. When you touch it, it just goes crazy and jumps like really far. Okay, I think I've found about where I'm at. Well, Michael's question is, John Manura does not like the double tape method you use. What does he recommend? I think he actually glues it to the board, is what he does. That's a little too much for me most of the time. So far, the double tape stick method for me has worked 100%. Now, I am very, very careful to do one thing before I do that, and that is that I joint the edge of the board so that it's smooth and flat before I put it on the table, and I make sure the edge of the board is sitting flat on top of the bandsaw table, so that when I glue it to the double stick tape, that it's supported by the table as well as the double stick tape. So when it's pulling down, it doesn't jerk down, you know what I mean, because it's already sitting on the table. So I think that's a big significant part of it. But I truly have not had any trouble with that. And I do like John's rig, I really do. I'm not just saying it because he gave it to me. I'm not saying, I'm not getting paid, by the way, you understand. He did give me the rig. But honestly, knowing what I know now, and especially if I was starting out again, I would buy the rig if I needed it. I really would. There's no question I would. Even though it does cost quite a bit. I mean, it's an expensive outfit, but it works really good for resawing the sides of an instrument. Is there any brand of wipe on poly that works better than others? Well, Eris, I'd have to pass that one off. I don't typically use wipe on poly, so I don't know on that. I just don't know. Maybe someone else can answer that in the comments. I typically only use two kinds of finish on my instruments, and one of them is the nitrocellulose lacquer, which is good and bad. It goes on easy, you know, reasonably easy to sand and all that, but I don't know. It just magnifies is the right word. I was trying to find the word. It magnifies any kind of problem you have on your instrument. I mean, I'm talking like if you have a pinhole, it makes it look like a volcano. You know, I mean, it's just nuts how it magnifies the problem. So I use either nitrocellulose lacquer, which is a good finish acoustically. See, I always consider what it does to the acoustics of the instrument. And for me, polyurethanes a little bit too rubbery, a little bit too soft, and I'm not saying you could hardly even notice the difference. I think for the most part you would probably be fine, but because there is a slightest difference, I just use what I think is the more superior. So it's either the nitrocellulose lacquer or the oil varnishes. Now the oil varnish that I'm presently using is gunstock varnish. Basically, it's true oil varnish. It works pretty good. It does, to some degree, magnify your problems that show up on your instrument also, kind of like the lacquer does, but not to the degree that the lacquer does. But it will also make any particular little tiny pinhole bigger. It's just the way that stuff works. I don't know why it does that. It just seems to repel from any kind of a little problem you have, and it's very difficult to get them to fill in. And don't get me started about wood fillers and grains and all that stuff, because most of those have some kind of problem. Either you got to put them on just as many times and take them off, just like these finishes are the same way with that, or, so to me, that mutes the point of even using them. Just throw them in the trash. If you got to put them on 14 times and sand them off, they do nothing for you. Throw them away. Just get rid of the darn grain fillers, you know, and all that, because they just don't work. So that's the first problem. Second problem is they'll change the color completely. I've had that happen on several of them. I think it's called top coat or something, aqua coat. I think it was aqua coat. Just changed the color of the Padauk, made it look like an orange. I mean, it made it look like an orange. It was horrible. Just looked terrible. I mean, that wood starts out kind of an orangey color anyway, but this turned it to make it look like an orange. I mean, physically look like an orange. Just looked horrible. I threw that stuff in the trash as soon as I put it on there. Then the other problem that they have is, well, okay, they either have to put it on multiple times, or they change the color, or they kill the sound, you know. So like if you go to the epoxy type things, you know, forget it. I'm not going to do that. That's just something it's just not going to help your sound. Sorry. Okay. I'm off that soapbox. You should never ask me about fillers. I hate it. But you didn't ask about fillers. I just got off on that tangent. Oh, sorry, Eris. But I hope that answers your question. I don't use the polys. What part of Missouri do you live? Well, we're down in the south central part of Missouri. We're down by Rolla, Missouri is the big town. That's our big city, if you will, of about 20,000 people. And the actual mailing address that for here is Newburgh, but Newburgh is just the post office, which is basically handed out of Rolla now. Newburgh is just a really tiny little dot on the map. And we actually live closer to Jerome, Missouri, which is really right at our exit, because we are at the Jerome exit off of 44. And Jerome is even tinier than Newburgh. Jerome is kind of like the suburbs of Newburgh. I laugh because we're talking tiny, 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 tiny. There's like nothing in either of those places, trust me. So if you do go looking for me, don't go down into Newburgh looking for me. We're off of the Jerome exit. Anyway, Bill Webb, I'm trying to set the neck relief on a bolt-on neck acoustic. I've shimmed it, but it is still high. What do you recommend other than shims on a bolt-on neck? When you say it's high, I'm assuming you're talking about the strings themselves are high. Because there could be different things that could be high. But I'm assuming you're talking about the strings are high on the neck. I don't know that there is anything other than shims to use. You just need thicker shims, I guess. I'm really not sure. I'd tell you, Bill, if I could think of anything, but I'd have to see what you're doing to maybe be more specific. But yeah, we just shim till we get it right, you know. So I would say just more of it. Sorry, I hope that helps. Have you ever worked on a Puerto Rican style cuarto guitar? Sort of. I've had a few things that came from like Mexico area that were similar to those kinds of instruments, but the truth is I am no expert on any of that. I don't know very much about any of that. But not really. So maybe the answer is just a better, no, I don't work on those. That's probably the better answer. How old are you? Well, I'm soon to be 67 in November. Let's see. Can I please stop talking about things dying of old age? Okay. I don't remember talking about anything dying of old age, but oh, I guess the deer out there. Okay, yeah. All right, I'll stop. Man, this scrolled up a long ways, and there's a bunch of questions. Sorry. Actually, I should have said action height and not neck relief. Yeah, Bill. I thought that's what you were talking about, but yeah, I honestly, Bill, I think just more shims is all I could suggest, or thicker shims or something. I'm not really sure. I'd have to see that particular bolt-on to see what the problem is. How about the Messiah mandolin? Well, I have to say, how about that? I don't know anything about that, to be truthful, so I'll have to pass on that one. I have a metal bridge on an electric guitar. Would you change it to some other type? Well, John, I'll be truthful on that, and that is I don't know that much about the electrics, and I don't honestly know enough to say that metal versus something else would be better. It doesn't seem to be a problem on the electrics. I've seen many electric guitars with metal saddles, metal bridges, metal adjustable saddles, etc. and so forth, and it doesn't seem to affect them. It's a different technology there. You're talking about acoustics, and what you're trying to get to vibrate on an acoustic is completely different than the technology that you're talking about on an electric instrument. In acoustics, there's, it's just this simple. If you don't hear me say anything else, hear these two things here that I'm about to tell you. It's very simple. There's only two things that vibrate on an instrument. One of them is the wood, the other is the metal strings. You're just trying to get more of the wood sound. That's what you're always striving for. And when you put, like, say, a metal bridge on top of that, it just makes it very harsh. It transfers that metallic sound down into the top even more so. And it makes it sound harsh and more metallic. And your idea is to sound more woody. And the bone is a very good transfer mechanism. In other words, it doesn't dampen the vibrations. That's what you got to be worried about. When you put, like, say, if you put a softwood, just as an example, say you put a piece of spruce in there for your saddle, that's such a soft wood. It might sound sort of kind of okay, but honestly, it's going to be really, compared to a good bone saddle, it's going to be way less vibratory, if you will. I don't know what the right word is. It's not going to vibrate as well. It's not going to be as clear sounding. It's not going to shake the whole instrument as well if you put something soft in there. So something extremely hard is almost the exact other problem. You just get too much of the hardness. And so that's why you want to hit that happy medium, and bone just seems to be about that happy medium. Plastics, they're a little bit on the other, they're a little bit more toward the soft side and a little bit more towards, now they do make like the Tusk and the harder plastics, and they work better. The micarta works better, etc., etc. But your bone seems to work the best. I mean, like, I really haven't had anybody tell me ever, not one single time in all these years, that the antler didn't sound as good as the plastic. You know what I mean? In other words, nobody ever said, let's take the antler out, I want to put my plastic saddle back in there. I've never had anybody say that. So that just ought to give you some kind of idea of how important the bone and the antler is to your acoustic instrument. Your electric instrument is a totally different technology. You're not necessarily trying to get that whole instrument to shake like that. So it's a different thing. I hope that makes sense to you. I hope that explained it. Somebody's telling Robert to put question marks in the front of his question, so I probably missed his question. Robert Shorthill, there it is, I see it. Jerry, is it possible to build a callus on the end of a missing fingertip? A lady that I heard about is not using her second finger because the tip is missing. Any idea to help her out? No, not too much of an idea other than the one that lots of folks use, and this is fairly common. People coat the tips of their fingers with super glue. And because super glue sticks to your finger really, really good. And so that might help her out. By the fact that the tip is missing, it may be may have a lot of nerves there, and it may be very sensitive to her. And if she coats it with the CA glue, I would think that would help her a lot. And the other possibility is even CA glue and maybe even a real thin piece of leather or something even put on the end there might help her out with the tip of her finger missing. That's about all I got on that. Thank goodness I don't have that issue to deal with. I got enough issues. I need to see somebody about all the issues I have already. Looks like we're at 9:08, so we're running over here. I'm going to answer maybe 2 more questions. What is your mandolin top and back thickness? Well, I'll be truthful and I'll tell you that I don't give out that information on my mandolins. I took apart a Lloyd Loar and I measured it in thousands of inches all over, and I don't give out those specific measurements. Now, other people get smart with me and they say, you're just being ignorant. There's people out there that's got the Lloyd Loar measurements out there, and my answer is, yeah, but they don't have the one I have. The mandolin I took apart was my uncle's, and it just happened to be, and not because it was my uncle's, it's got nothing to do with anything like that. It just happened to be considered by many people to be one of the finest Loars ever built, really. It was a great mandolin, just a great mandolin. And it happened to be one of the loudest mandolins, one of the loudest Loars. And so, therefore, when I use those exact measurements on my mandolins, guess what? They're all very loud. And so I don't give those out. It's just something that I share everything with everybody. I just don't share those specific measurements. Sorry. What is your, let's see here. Last question here. And I've got to find one. Here we go. Okay, Stu asks, and this is a good question to end on. Would you recommend sanding the bridge down to correct the neck angle on an acoustic guitar? Well, Stu, it's a good question, and it's something that you can do under certain circumstances. It's one of those questions where you have to know more. You can't just say, yeah, you can just sand it down. Here's the caveats on that, Stu, and that is if the bridge has got enough thickness to it, and to give you some ballpark idea, 3/8 of an inch thick. If it's 3/8 of an inch thick or thicker, which I hope it's not thicker than that, but if it's in that ballpark, sure, you can sand it down some. If you get down to the, I'm going to say 1/4 inch thick, then you're probably too thin. At that point, I wouldn't go, and those are just ballpark numbers off the top of my head, and every circumstance could be different. But I would say if your bridge is 1/4 inch thick or thinner, then no, I probably wouldn't sand it down. But if it's 3/8 of an inch thick or thicker, for sure, you could sand it down. And if you get down to the 1/4 inch thickness, then I'd for sure stop. I wouldn't go any thinner than about 1/4 inch. I hope that helps you. Yeah, and Stu, you've heard me say many times, I always do the simple thing first. And if you think you can get to the right height and get your saddle adjusted properly and get the thing to play correctly by doing that, then I do it. If you have reservations and you think, well, it may still be high, then you might be better off just biting a bullet and doing a neck reset. But so often people do neck resets unnecessarily. I mean unnecessarily so very often. Yeah, there's just people out there that's all they do. I know a fellow in St. Louis, that's all he does is neck resets. He's got them lined up all the way around his room. I don't do that many neck resets. When you do on a comparative basis on how many instruments I work on compared to how many I do neck resets on, it's pretty small percentage. And so most instruments don't need a neck reset, just people think they do. That's where I'm going to leave it. I do thank you so much for tuning in. We had 194 viewers as of right now. We might have went over 200 at one point there with that many. So thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you next Friday morning, 8 a.m. sharp. Have a great day.